My mother told me never to open the old suitcase in the attic. After her death, she left the house and $700,000 to my brother, and to me, only that shabby suitcase. My husband was furious. Even your own mother didn't love you, and filed for divorce. But when I finally opened the suitcase, my mother told me never to open the old suitcase in the attic. As a child, I was strictly forbidden even to go near it. "If I ever see you near that suitcase, I'll send you to an orphanage," she would say, and the fire in her eyes was so fierce that I believed every word. Now she was dying, lying in a hospital bed, emaciated and bitter, her skin yellowed, her lips cracked. Pancreatic cancer gave no chances, but even in her last days she found the strength to wound me. "Why are you sitting here with that face?" she whispered, barely turning her head. "Do you think you'll get something after I die?" "Mom, please." I tried to take her hand, but she pulled it away. "Gray mouse," she hissed through her teeth. "You've always been that way. No wonder your husband will soon leave you. Men don't love women like you. Boring, colorless, submissive." Her words hurt more than a slap in the face, but I stayed silent. After 32 years, I was used to being the lightning rod for her anger. My mother died on a rainy October evening, never once saying a kind word to me. I held her hand as she took her last breath, still hoping she'd open her eyes and tell me she'd loved me all along. But the miracle never came. A week after the funeral, we gathered in the office of the family lawyer. My husband David sat beside me, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. Across from us was my older brother Mike, who had flown in from Texas. I could feel the tension in the air, bracing for trouble, though I had no idea just how bad it would be. "I, Anna Louise Miller, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby bequeath the following." The elderly lawyer began reading. "The house on Maple Street, with all its contents, as well as the sum of $700,000, I leave to my son, Michael Miller." David straightened in his chair, his eyes widening. I felt my heart go cold. "To my daughter, Irene Miller Johnson, I leave the old suitcase located in the attic of the family home." Nothing else. Dead silence filled the office. David went pale, then red with anger. "A suitcase?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Some old junk?" "The old leather suitcase in the attic," the lawyer clarified. Mrs. Miller was very insistent that it be specified in exactly those words. At home, all hell broke loose. David stormed around the apartment, shouting and throwing things. "I can't take this anymore." His face was twisted with rage. $700,000 to your brother, and to you, junk. Even your own mother didn't love you. That says it all about you. That night, he packed his things and left, slamming the door. He said he was filing for divorce, that my mother's will was the last straw. My mother's words had come true with terrifying accuracy. My husband really did run away, leaving me alone in an empty apartment, my heart shattered, my soul burning with humiliation. I didn't even want to look at that suitcase, much less open it. But my brother Mike brought it to me. "You have to take it," he said, setting the battered leather suitcase down in the hallway. "Mom wanted it to be yours." That night, after Mike left, I sat for a long time in front of the suitcase, afraid to touch it. What could be inside? What other secrets had my mother hidden? What could possibly be so important about this worn piece of leather with darkened brass clasps? Finally, mustering my courage, I snapped the locks and slowly lifted the lid. What I found at the bottom turned my whole life upside down. But before I tell you about that discovery, I need to go back many years, to childhood, where the roots of my story intertwine with the secret my mother carried all her life. I had always known that my mother didn't love me. That realization came early, when I was 5 or 6, perhaps. There was no single moment of revelation, just the gradual understanding that in Anna Miller's eyes, whenever she looked at me, there was none of the warmth I saw when she looked at my older brother, Michael. Mike was 8 years older than me, and to Mom, he was everything. Her firstborn, her pride, her only joy in life. When Mike came home from school, she dropped everything to listen to his every word. When he was sick, she never left his bedside. When he wanted something, she found a way to give it to him, even if it meant cutting corners on everything else. With me, it was different. Irene, don't get underfoot was one of the phrases I heard most often as a child. Irene, why are you so clumsy? Irene, don't cry. I'm sick enough of the sight of you already. That last one stuck in my memory. I was 7, I had fallen off my bike and scraped my knee. I ran home in tears, but Mom didn't even lift her head from cooking dinner. Mom, it hurts, I sobbed, showing her the bloody scrape. And what do you want me to do? Kiss it and make it better? Her voice was cold, irritated. Go wash it with water, put a Band-Aid on it, and stop crying. I'm already sick of the sight of you. Mike, who was doing homework at the kitchen table, lifted his head. Mom, she's just a child. Don't interfere, Michael. She's fine. But Mike stood up, took me by the hand, and led me to the bathroom. He cleaned my wound, carefully put on a Band-Aid, and even drew a funny face on it. Don't pay attention to Mom, he whispered. She's just tired. But I knew it wasn't about being tired. Mom was never too tired when it came to Mike. I grew up knowing I was a burden in that house. Mom worked 2 jobs, days at a fabric store, evenings cleaning an office building. She constantly reminded me how hard it was to raise 2 children on her own. If it weren't for you, she said whenever she was especially angry, I could have given Michael so much more. And she also said I looked too much like my father. She said it in such a tone as if resembling him was the worst crime in the world. You've got his eyes, Mom spat through her teeth when I asked her to help with homework, and his insolence too. I had never seen a picture of my father. There wasn't a single photograph of him in the house, not one item to remind me he had ever existed. All I knew was that he had left Mom when he found out she was pregnant. There was only one thing in the house that always intrigued me and Mike, the old leather suitcase in the attic, worn with darkened brass clasps and barely visible initials, ALM, on the side. Mom, what's in that suitcase? I asked once, when I was about 8. Mom spun around sharply, and the fire in her eyes made me step back in fear. Never, do you hear me? Never touch that suitcase. Her voice trembled with rage. Neither you nor Mike. Those are my personal things, and they're none of your business. But Mom, no buts. She grabbed my shoulders and squeezed painfully. If I ever find out you've been in that suitcase, I'll throw you out of this house. Do you understand? I nodded, frightened by her reaction. From then on, the suitcase became for me a symbol of the forbidden, something terribly important and dangerous at the same time. Mike got a similar scolding when he tried to ask about it. They're just old papers and junk, Mom muttered. Nothing interesting, and if either of you tries to open it, you'll regret it. But we were children, and children can sense lies. We knew there was something much more important in that suitcase than just documents. What do you think is in there? Mike whispered when we sat in his room late at night. Maybe money? Or jewelry? Or maybe something about Dad, Mike suggested. About your dad, I mean. We often talked about sneaking a look inside, but Mom's ban was too absolute. We feared her fury more than we wanted to satisfy our curiosity. One day, when I was 10, I finally climbed up to the attic and tried to open the suitcase, but the locks were shut and there was no key. I shook it. Something rustled inside, but I couldn't tell what it was. What are you doing here? Mom's voice behind me made me jump in terror. I turned and saw her face twisted with rage. I told you not to touch that suitcase. She grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the stairs. Down now! That day, Mom hit me for the first time. Not hard, just a slap across the face. But to me, it was like a lightning strike. Mike wasn't home. There was no one to protect me. "If I ever see you near that suitcase again," Mom said coldly, "I'll send you to an orphanage." Don't think I'm joking. After that, I was afraid even to think about the suitcase. But the curiosity never went away. Sometimes, lying in bed, I imagined what might be inside. Letters from my father, photographs, maybe an explanation of why he had left us. Mike told me the truth about my origins when I turned 14. We were sitting on the porch. He was smoking. Mom didn't yet know about his bad habit, and I was complaining about her latest unfairness. Why does she hate me, Mike? What did I do wrong? My brother took a drag, stayed silent for a long time, watching the sunset. Irene, it's not about you. It's about who your father is. But he's your father, too. No. Mike shook his head. My father died when I was 3. Lung cancer. Your father. He's someone else entirely. He told me a story he probably shouldn't have told a 14-year-old girl. After her first husband died, Mom spent several years alone, raising Mike. Life was hard, working 2 jobs, constant lack of money, loneliness. And then he came along, Mike continued, a handsome, charming man who managed to make Mom believe in love again. What was his name? Thomas. Thomas Ryan. I remember him vaguely. I was only 11 at the time, but I remember how Mom changed when he was around. She became young, beautiful, happy. She even started buying herself new dresses, putting on makeup, singing while she worked around the house. Mike told me that Thomas often came over, brought him gifts, helped with homework. He was kind, attentive, and seemed to truly love Mom. She was crazy about him, Mike said. She planned to marry him, dreamed of a big family. They even started looking for a bigger house. But when Mom told him she was pregnant, everything changed. At first, he said it was wonderful, that he was happy. But then, something happened. He started coming less often, blaming work, and a month later, he was gone. Just gone? Yes, not even a note. Mom waited a week, then went to his job. They told her he'd quit and moved to another city. Nobody knew where. Mike stubbed out his cigarette and looked at me. Mom turned to stone after he disappeared. She stopped putting on makeup, stopped singing, stopped smiling. She went through the whole pregnancy in a daze. And when you were born, when I was born, she saw him, I finished. Yes, you look so much like him, Irene. The eyes, the shape of your face, even your smile. And every day looking at you, she's reminded of how she was betrayed. Something inside me broke for good that day. I realized that no matter what I did, Mom could never love me, because to her, I wasn't a daughter. I was a constant reminder of the greatest pain of her life. And in the suitcase, I began. Probably something connected to him, Mike said. Maybe letters or photographs. Mom never told me details, but I saw her go up to the attic sometimes, especially on the anniversary of his disappearance or on your birthday. She went up there on my birthday? Yes, she'd sit beside the suitcase for hours. Sometimes she cried. That revelation stunned me. So Mom did think of me on my birthday, not to celebrate, but to grieve. When I turned 14, something happened that changed my life forever. Mike decided to join the army. I can't stay here anymore, he told me one evening. I need to build my own life, Irene. I love you, but I can't be your shield forever. But what about me? Panic crept into my voice. You're the only one who loves you, he finished gently. That won't change. No matter where I am, I'll always be your big brother. But I'm 22, Irene. It's time I live my own life. Mom met Mike's decision with pride and sorrow at once. She told all the neighbors that her son was serving his country, that he was a hero. But once he was gone, all her coldness fell on me twice as hard. I hope you're happy. she told me the day Mike's first letter arrived from training camp. Now all I have left is you. One big disappointment. Mom, it wasn't me who made him leave. Wasn't it? Who else then? If it weren't for you, Mike could have stayed here, helped me. Instead, he ran away just so he wouldn't have to watch you ruin my life. It was unfair, and I knew it. Mike hadn't left because of me. He wanted independence. But Mom needed someone to blame, and I was the perfect candidate. I learned to be quiet, invisible. I came home from school, did my homework, helped with the housework, and tried not to cross her path. But even that annoyed her. You drift around here like a ghost, she muttered. At least show some spirit, like your father. You're neither fish nor fowl. I didn't understand what she wanted from me. If I was active, I was in the way. If I was quiet, I was a ghost. It seemed my very existence irritated her. Mike wrote letters, but not often. Army life was demanding, and later he stayed on as a military contractor somewhere in Texas, 1,000 miles from home. Our paths diverged, and though he never forgot birthdays and holidays, he wasn't physically there when I needed him most. Sometimes, on especially hard days when Mom was colder or crueler than usual, I climbed up to the attic and sat beside that suitcase. I didn't try to open it. I was too afraid of her wrath. But for some reason, being near it calmed me. Maybe because it was the only secret in our house, the only thing that might explain why my life had turned out the way it had. I finished high school and enrolled in a local college for library science. Not because I really wanted to, but because it was one of the few programs we could afford. Mom made it clear that after 18, I was to take care of myself. Michael earns money in the Army, she would say. He sends me support. And you only spend. It wasn't fair. I had been working part-time at the college library since my freshman year, paying my own expenses and even helping with the utility bills. But Mom only saw what she wanted to see. I lived in the dorms and tried to come home as rarely as possible. When I did, Mom met me with a stony face. "So you showed up," was her standard greeting. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" How am I supposed to be? I work myself to the bone to keep this house going, and you come here like it's a hotel. Mom, I'm studying. And working too. Studying, she scoffed. To be a librarian. What a career. Every such conversation ended the same way. I left earlier than planned with a heavy heart and tears in my eyes. At college, I had a few acquaintances, but no real friends. I was too withdrawn, too unsure of myself. Many classmates tried to get closer, invited me to parties, to cafes, but I always found excuses. I felt that if people got to know me better, they would realize what my mother had always known, that something was wrong with me, something that made me unworthy of love. After college, I got a job at the city library. I liked the work. Books didn't betray, didn't hurt, didn't demand that you be someone else. Among them, I felt safe. I rented a small apartment near work and lived very modestly. Once a month, I visited Mom, always hoping something had changed, that she would finally see me as her daughter, not just a reminder of past pain. But nothing ever changed. Mom grew older, more withdrawn, more irritable. She rarely left the house except for work, didn't talk to neighbors, had no friends. It seemed life was just passing her by. "When will you finally get married?" she would sometimes ask. "I'm tired of explaining to the neighbors why my daughter is a spinster." "I'm only 25, Mom." At 25, I was already married and raising Michael. And you're still buried in your libraries. Maybe if you taught me how to talk to people. "Don't you dare blame me for your failures," Mom would explode. "I fed you, clothed you, gave you a roof over your head. If you can't attract a man, that's your problem." Such conversations always ended in a quarrel, after which I wouldn't go home for months. At 27, I met David Johnson. He was an architect at the firm designing a new wing for our library, a handsome, confident man from a good family. David came to the library on a rainy October day to study the building layout. I showed him the different sections, explained how we worked, what we needed from the new wing. "You really know your field," he said when the tour was over. "I love my job." That's rare these days. Most people only work for money. He invited me for coffee after work. I wanted to decline, as always, but something in his manner felt sincere. We talked in the cafe for 2 hours. David told me about his job, his future plans, his dream of starting his own architectural firm. He was ambitious, determined, and next to him, I felt important. "Why did you choose me?" I asked on our third date. "You're different from other women," he said. "You're quiet, calm, intelligent. Not hysterical like most, and beautiful, of course." Those were the words I had dreamed all my life of hearing. Someone thought I was beautiful, intelligent, worth noticing. I fell in love, not so much with David himself, but with the feeling of being valued that he gave me. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. The proposal wasn't romantic. He simply said over dinner at a restaurant, "I think we should get married. We're a good match. No, I love you. No, I can't live without you." Just a practical decision between two adults. But for me, it was a miracle. Mom reacted to the news of the engagement with surprise and suspicion. "What did he see in you?" she asked. "Thanks for the support, Mom." "I'm serious. He's got a good job, a respectable family. Why would he marry a librarian?" "Maybe because he likes me." Mom snorted. "I just hope he knows what he's getting into." The wedding was small. Several colleagues, David's friends, his parents. Mike flew in from Texas, his first visit home in 3 years. Mom behaved at the wedding as if it were someone else's celebration. She didn't cry with happiness, didn't hug me, didn't say a single warm word. She just sat there. "I wish you happiness," she said to David during the reception, shaking his hand. "I hope she doesn't give you too much trouble." David smiled, but I could see her words had surprised him. Mike was the only one who seemed genuinely happy for me. "You deserve love," he whispered as we danced the wedding dance. "Never forget that." "Does he love me?" I asked. Mike looked at me closely, then at David, who was chatting with guests. "I think he values you," he said carefully, "and that's already a good start." The first months of marriage were happy, or at least I thought they were. We lived in a beautiful apartment David rented. We had a shared life, shared plans. David worked a lot, often went on business trips, but when he was home, he was attentive and considerate. True, our conversations were mostly about practical things: work, weekend plans, household issues. "You're too quiet," he'd sometimes say at dinner. "Can't you talk about something?" "Talk about what?" "I don't know." "About work, about what's going on in your head. Sometimes it feels like I'm living with a ghost." I tried to be more talkative, told him about the books I was reading, the library visitors, my thoughts. But David listened absent-mindedly, often distracted by his phone or the TV. Gradually, I realized that to him, I was more of a convenient addition to his life than a beloved woman. I cooked, cleaned, didn't cause problems, didn't demand too much attention. The perfect wife for a busy man. When I tried to talk about having children, David would say, "It's too early. We need to get firmly on our feet financially first." When I suggested spending weekends together, he said, "I have an important project. Maybe next time." Gradually, we began living like roommates, polite but distant. David came home late. I went to bed early. In the mornings, he left for work before I woke up. But I told myself this was normal. Not all marriages are passionate romances. The main thing is stability and mutual respect. Mom, strangely enough, approved of my marriage. "Finally, you're behaving like a normal woman," she said when I told her about my steady life with David. "The husband works, the wife keeps the house. That's how it should be." But sometimes, lying in bed next to a sleeping David, I felt even lonelier than in the years I'd lived alone. Mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when I was 32. The diagnosis sounded like a sentence. The doctors said there was little time left, maybe 6 months, a year at most. I remember the day Mom called me at work. "Irene, I need to talk to you." Her voice sounded strange, softer than usual. "What happened?" "Not over the phone, come tonight." When I arrived, Mom was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a stack of medical papers. "Sit down," she said, "I have cancer." The words hit like lightning. Despite everything between us, the thought that my mother might die terrified me to my core. "Mom." I reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled it away. "No need for sentimentality." "I called you to discuss practical matters." She told me about the treatment, about how she'd need help. Mike was far away in Texas, with his own life, his own family. That left only me. "I'm not asking you to quit your job," Mom said, "but sometimes I'll need rides to the hospital, help around the house." "Of course, Mom. I'll come every day." She looked at me with surprise. "Why every day?" "Because you're my mother, and right now you need help." Despite all our difficulties, I couldn't leave her alone at such a time. For the next months, I spent every evening at Mom's house, cooking, cleaning, driving her to treatments, sitting in hospital corridors during chemotherapy. David wasn't enthusiastic about it. "Your mother treated you badly your whole life," he said. "Why are you wasting so much time on her?" "She's sick, David." "So what? That's not your fault. She has insurance. She has nurses. Why do you have to go there every day?" But I couldn't explain to him that by taking care of Mom, I hoped at last to receive what I'd waited for all my life, her love, or at least her gratitude. The illness didn't make Mom softer. If anything, she became even more irritable and demanding. "The soup is too salty," she'd say when I brought her dinner. "Why so late?" she'd complain if I was 5 minutes behind schedule. "Don't sit there like you're at a funeral," she'd snap when I simply sat by her bed. But sometimes, in rare moments of weakness, she became almost human. "Why are you here, Irene?" she asked one day after an especially hard chemotherapy session. "Because you're my mother." "A bad mother," she said unexpectedly softly. "I know I'm a bad mother." For a moment, I thought it was the beginning of reconciliation, that the illness had forced her to rethink our relationship. "Mom, but you're just like your father." "Exactly like him." Her voice turned harsh again, and I can't forget that. Even dying. Mike flew in to see Mom when it became clear the end was near. He looked shocked at how gaunt and aged she had become. They spent hours talking about his childhood, his job, his plans for the future. With me, she spoke only about practical matters, medicine, bills, what needed to be bought at the store. "Don't take it personally, Irene," Mike said when we sat in the hospital cafeteria. "She's sick. She's in pain." "Mike, she's always been this way with me. The illness has nothing to do with it." "I know. But maybe now something will change. People often reassess their lives before death, but nothing changed. If anything, Mom became even crueler, as if the illness had freed all the bitterness she had carried for years. "You're wasting your time on me," she told me a week before her death. "You'd be better off paying attention to your husband. Otherwise, he'll leave you too, just like your father." "Mom, why would you say that?" "I'm telling you the truth. You don't know how to keep men. Too plain, too boring." In her final days, Mom hardly spoke at all. She lay with her eyes closed, breathing heavy and uneven. I sat by her bed, holding her hand, thinking about how I would never hear words of love from her. And so it was. Mom died on a rainy October evening. I was beside her, holding her hand when she opened her eyes for the last time. Her breathing grew shallower, and a few minutes later, it stopped. I sat by the bed for another half hour, still holding the hand of the woman who'd never managed to tell me she loved me. The funeral was quiet. A few neighbors came, some colleagues from Mom's work. Mike flew in from Texas. David stood beside me, but I felt his impatience. He glanced at his watch several times during the service. "When will the will be read?" he asked when we returned home from the cemetery. "David, we just buried my mother." "I know, but there are practical matters that need to be resolved. The house, the inheritance." Something in his voice made me uneasy. A week later, we gathered in the office of the family lawyer, Mr. Harrison. Mike sat across from us, looking tired and sad. David was nervous, tapping his fingers on the table. Mr. Harrison, an elderly man with kind eyes who had known our family for many years, cleared his throat and began to read. "I, Anna Louise Miller, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby bequeath the following." My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't expect much. Mom had never hidden her preferences, but I still hoped for at least a symbolic gesture, some acknowledgement that I was her daughter, too. The house on Maple Street with all its contents, as well as the sum of $700,000, I leave to my son, Michael Miller. David straightened sharply in his chair. "To my daughter, Irene Miller Johnson, I leave the old suitcase located in the attic of the family home." Nothing else. The silence in the office was deafening. David flushed red, then turned pale. "A suitcase?" he repeated, his voice trembling. "What suitcase?" "The old leather suitcase in the attic," Mr. Harrison explained. "Mrs. Miller was very insistent that it be worded that way in her will. $700,000 to her brother and to your wife, a pile of junk from the attic?" David's voice grew louder. "This is an insult." "David, please," I tried to stop him. "No." He jumped to his feet. "This is the last straw, Irene. Even your own mother thought you were worthless. What does that say about you as a person?" Mike stood up too. "Hey, take it easy. Irene isn't to blame for this." "Oh yeah, then why did her mother leave her nothing but some old trash?" David turned to me. 32 years you were her daughter. You took care of her when she was sick. And what did you get in return?" Each of his words was like a knife. I sat in silence, feeling something inside me break for good. At home, David unleashed a storm. "I can't do this anymore," he shouted, pacing the living room. "I married you thinking we'd have a normal life." "So, you married me for money?" David stopped and looked at me with a cold smirk. "What money?" "I married you because you were convenient, quiet, undemanding, always eager to please. The perfect housewife. But I'm tired, Irene. Tired of pretending I care about your talk of books. Tired of acting like there's anything between us besides habit." Each word hit like a blow. I stood in the middle of the living room, feeling the last illusion of being loved crumble. "And now this will," he continued. "That's the final straw. If even your own mother didn't love you or think you were worthy of an inheritance, why should I waste my life on you? I thought we loved each other." "Loved?" He laughed. "Irene, you don't even know what love is. You're just grateful for any scrap of attention, like a dog wagging its tail because it isn't being beaten." He pulled out his phone. "I'm filing for divorce. Tomorrow I'm calling a lawyer." "All right," I answered quietly. He froze, clearly expecting me to beg him to stay, to cry, to promise to change. "All right? That's all you have to say? What else?" I looked at him calmly. "You're right. I'm not worth anything. Mom knew it. You know it. Maybe it's better if you find someone who deserves love." He stared at me in surprise, then snorted and went to the bedroom to pack his things. The next day, David left. He didn't even say goodbye. I was alone in the empty apartment. I worked, came home, ate, went to bed. I spoke to no one unless it was about work. I felt like I'd become a shadow, a ghost of myself. 2 weeks later, I started feeling nauseous. At first, I blamed stress, but when it continued for several days, I bought a pregnancy test. 2 lines appeared almost instantly. Pregnant. By a man who had just abandoned me because I was convenient but boring. A man who made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me. History was repeating itself. Just as my mother had been abandoned 32 years earlier, I was left behind, pregnant. I didn't know what to do. My thoughts ran in circles, none bringing comfort. I couldn't stop thinking about my childhood, about how Mom had hated me for reminding her of betrayal. Would I be able not to hate my own child, not to see David in him, not to project my pain onto him? 3 weeks after David's departure, the doorbell rang. Mike was standing there with a large, battered suitcase in his hands. "Hey, kiddo," he said, looking guilty and worried. "Mike, what are you doing here?" "Brought you your inheritance." He lifted the suitcase. "Mom left this to you and you're supposed to have it." I looked at the old leather suitcase. It was big, heavy, with scuffed corners and darkened brass clasps. On the side were those faded initials, ALM. "Honestly, I don't want it." "Irene." Mike stepped into the apartment and set the suitcase in the hallway. "I'm so sorry for everything that happened. I didn't know Mom would write such a will. It's not your fault." She had every right to dispose of her money however she wanted. We sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee. Mike told me about his work in Texas, about the woman he was seeing, about his plans for the future. I listened, but my thoughts were far away. "David filed for divorce," I said finally. "Because of the will?" "No. Well, the will was the last straw. He said I'm boring, that I was convenient, but he got tired of pretending." Mike frowned. "He's a bastard." "You deserve so much better." I shook my head. "And also, Mike, I'm pregnant." My brother looked at me with horror and sympathy. "Oh, Irene, does he know?" "No, I only found out after he left." "Are you going to tell him?" I was silent for a long time. "I don't know." "Why? So he'd stay with me out of pity or a sense of duty? He made it clear he doesn't want to be with me." Mike came over and hugged me. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." "But Irene, you're not Mom. You don't have to repeat her path." I broke down crying. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself that weakness. "I'm scared, Mike. Scared of becoming like her. Cold, cruel. Scared of hating my child for looking like his father." "That won't happen," Mike said firmly. "You know what it's like not to be loved." "You'll never do that to your child." We talked for several more hours. When Mike left, I sat for a long time in front of the suitcase, afraid to open it. What could be inside? What other secrets had my mother kept? Finally, summoning my courage, I opened the suitcase. Inside were photographs, letters, documents, everything connected to my father, Thomas Ryan. I spent the whole night going through its contents. There were photographs of my father with Mom, happy, in love, letters he had written before he learned about the pregnancy. They were full of love, plans for the future, promises of eternal devotion. But then the tone of the letters changed. I found the last one, dated the day Mom told him she was pregnant. "Anna, I can't take on that kind of responsibility. A child is forever, and I'm not ready. Forgive me, but I have to go. Short, cold, cruel." No regret, no remorse, just a blunt statement. He didn't want a child, didn't want responsibility, didn't want me. There were letters to his parents begging for help, unanswered, even lawsuits for paternity recognition that went nowhere because he couldn't be found. At the very bottom of the suitcase, I discovered an envelope that hadn't been there before, a new, modern one. When I opened it, I froze in shock. It was a bank statement in my name confirming a transfer of $700,000. Alongside it was the deed to my mother's house, and a short note from Mike. "Irene, this money was always meant for you. Mom was unfair, and I won't be complicit in that injustice. Use it to start a new life, for yourself and for your child. You deserve happiness. Love, Mike." I couldn't believe my eyes. $700,000. The entire inheritance Mom had left Mike was now mine, plus Mom's house. My brother had given me everything, down to the last cent. Tears ran down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of gratitude and relief. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a brother who loved me no matter what, and now I had the means to begin a new life. By morning, I had made two important decisions. First, I would keep the baby and love him with all my heart, no matter what. I wouldn't repeat Mom's mistake. My child would know he was wanted and loved, even if his father had chosen to disappear. Second, I would find my father. Not to ask for help or recognition, just to look him in the eyes and ask, why? With the money Mike had given me, both decisions became possible. I could afford a good private investigator. I could provide a decent life for myself and my child without relying on anyone else. Finding Thomas Ryan turned out to be unexpectedly easy. The suitcase contained old addresses, workplaces, friends' names, information 30 years old, but enough for the detective I hired to begin the search. Within 3 months, I had his current address. Thomas Ryan lived in a small town 2 hours away. An ordinary middle-class life. House, job at an insurance company, a wife, 2 teenage children. He had built a new family, a family where I didn't exist. I agonized over whether to go. What would I say? What was I hoping to achieve? Would my appearance ruin his new life? But the need for answers outweighed the doubts. When my belly began to show, I decided it was time. I wanted to look into the eyes of the man who had abandoned me before I was even born, before I became a mother myself. I arrived at his house on a weekday, when the kids should have been at school. I rang the bell, and when he opened the door, I saw instant recognition in his eyes. He knew who I was. Maybe he saw his own features in mine, or those of the woman he had once loved, but he knew. "Thomas Ryan?" I asked formally. "Yes," he replied, paling. "My name is Irene Miller." "I'm Anna Miller's daughter." He was silent, then said quietly, "I know who you are. May I come in? I think we have things to talk about." He let me into the house. We sat in the living room, and I noticed his gaze linger on my belly. You're expecting a child?" he asked uncertainly. "Yes, 4 months. The father?" "He left me when he found out I was pregnant," I said, looking him straight in the eyes. "As you can see, history repeats itself." He looked away. "Why did you come? Money? Recognition?" "Answers," I said simply. "Why did you leave Mom when you found out I was coming? Why did you never try to contact me? Why did you just disappear?" Thomas sighed heavily. "It was a different time. I was young, just starting my career. A child wasn't part of my plans. But you weren't a teenager. You were 32, and you and Mom were serious." "Yes, we were," he admitted. "But when Anna got pregnant, I panicked. I realized I wasn't ready, that I didn't love her enough to build a family. Then why not just say that? Why vanish without a trace?" He was silent for a long time, then whispered, "Because I was a coward. Because I couldn't look her in the eye and tell her I didn't want to be with her anymore. It was easier just to leave. Do you understand what you did to me and Mom?" My voice shook. "She never recovered from your betrayal. She hated me my whole life because I reminded her of you. I grew up knowing my own mother couldn't love me." His face twisted with pain. I didn't know it would be like that. I thought she'd manage. She was such a strong woman." "Yes, she was strong, but even strong people can break, and she did, and I paid the price for it all my life." We talked for a long time. He told me his version of events, how he feared responsibility, how he moved to another city and started a new life, how he sometimes thought of me but convinced himself it was better not to interfere. And then I met Carol. We married. We had children, he said, and it became even harder to confess. How could I tell my wife that I had a child I'd never cared for? Do they know about me? I asked. Your wife? Your kids? No, he shook his head. No one knows. And you never wanted to find out how I was living? Whether I was sick or dead or suffering? He faltered. I tried not to think about it. I told myself Anna would manage, that you'd both be fine. Looking at him, I didn't see a father, just a frightened, weak man. A man who, 32 years ago, made a choice that defined my entire life. You know, my mother died last year, I said. Cancer. She kept a suitcase with your photos and letters all her life. She could never let go of the pain you caused her. I'm sorry, he whispered. So am I replied, standing up. I came here for answers, and I got them. Now I can move on. I walked toward the door, but stopped when I saw a family photo on the wall and turned back. You have a beautiful family, Thomas. I hope you cherish them more than the one you abandoned. Outside, I took a deep breath. Strangely, I felt lighter, as if the burden I'd carried all my life had eased, just a little. Now I knew the truth, however painful it was, and I could begin a new chapter of my life. Meeting my father changed something in me. It didn't heal the wounds of the past completely, but it helped me understand. I don't want to live with the same pain that destroyed my mother. I don't want to repeat her mistakes. With the money Mike had given me, I bought a small house in the suburbs. Not luxurious, but cozy, with a garden and big windows that let in sunlight. I sold Mother's house. The new house had no memories of her coldness. It was mine, my own space. I left my library job in the last trimester of pregnancy. The divorce with David went through quickly and without problems. In February, I gave birth to a son. I named him Michael, after the brother who had always been there when I needed him. Holding that tiny bundle in my arms, I looked at his little face and saw David's features. But instead of rejection or bitterness, I felt only boundless love. Love my mother could never give me. Love I vowed to give my son every day of his life. I will always love you, I whispered to him, no matter what happens, no matter who you become. It was a vow I gave not only to my son, but also to myself, to break the chain of pain that had passed from generation to generation. David came to the hospital, brought flowers and gifts. I saw in his eyes surprise, maybe even regret. He wanted to be part of Michael's life, and I wasn't going to stop him. But for me, David was part of the past. Mike flew in for a week to meet his nephew. He's beautiful, he said, holding the baby in his arms, and he has a happy mother. That's what matters most. Thank you, I hugged my brother, for everything, for your support, for the money, for always being there. Hey, we're family, he smiled, a real family. And for the first time in my life, I understood that I truly had a family. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed this story, please support it with a like, a comment, or a subscription. Thank you.